The sun rose over New York as William Thompson gazed at the city from the heights of his 50th floor office. At 68, he led one of the largest business empires in the country, the Thompson Group, a powerhouse that spanned multiple continents. His tired eyes scanned the urban landscape as his mind wandered through the recent events that had disrupted his seemingly unshakable routine. "Mr. Thompson, your daughter Emily is here for the meeting," his secretary announced over the intercom. "Send her in, Margaret," he replied, adjusting his navy blue tie in the reflection of the window. Emily Thompson, 40, a brilliant lawyer and head of the legal department at the Thompson Group, entered the room with her usual impeccable posture. Her heels echoed across the marble floor as she approached the solid mahogany desk where her father typically commanded his empire. "Father, we need to discuss the expansion project in Asia. The financial projections have come in, and there are some concerning points that require your immediate attention," she said bluntly, placing a folder on the table. William smiled faintly. Emily had always been like this, direct, focused, perfectionistic. From a young age, she had shown a natural aptitude for business, inheriting his determination and strategic vision. However, before he could respond, a sudden dizziness made him lean on the desk. "Father, are you okay?" Emily asked, her firm voice betraying a hint of concern. Yes, just a passing discomfort," he replied, regaining his composure. "It must be fatigue. These last few days have been intense." But it wasn't just fatigue. For weeks, William had been experiencing strange symptoms: dizziness, extreme fatigue, numbness in his extremities. Initially, he attributed it to the natural stress of running a conglomerate the size of the Thompson Group. However, the symptoms were intensifying. "Father, you need to take care of yourself. Michael continues with his reckless lifestyle. Sophia is becoming more distant with those mysterious trips, and I can't handle everything alone," argued Emily, her concern masked by a veiled critique of her siblings. William sighed, thinking about his other two children. Michael, 35, was the middle child, known in the social columns for his extravagant parties and troubled relationships. Meanwhile, Sophia, the youngest at 28, had always been the most reserved, dedicating herself to the group's social projects, though lately she had been strangely absent. "Emily, you know I trust you to handle the business, but I also know your siblings have their own values and contributions to the group," he replied diplomatically. At that moment, Margaret hurriedly entered the room. "Mr. Thompson, Dr. Johnson is on the line. He said it's urgent, about your test results." William's expression changed subtly. Days ago, he had undergone a series of tests after a particularly severe episode of discomfort. Dr. Johnson, his personal physician for decades, had insisted on further investigations. "Emily, can we continue this discussion later? I need to take this call," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Of course, Dad, but don't forget we have the board meeting tomorrow. We need your decision on the expansion," replied Emily, gathering her documents. As he watched his eldest daughter leave the room, William felt a weight in his chest that had nothing to do with his physical symptoms. Something told him his life was about to change drastically, and that call from Dr. Johnson would be just the beginning. Elizabeth, his wife of 42 years, always said he had a sixth sense for adversity. "That's what helped you build this empire, William. You always know when a storm is coming," she used to say. Now, looking out the window of his office, he could sense that a storm much greater than any other was approaching. The phone rang again, and with a decisive motion, William answered. "Dr. Johnson, I'm listening," he said, his voice betraying a rare hint of apprehension. Dr. Johnson's voice sounded grave on the other end of the line. "William, your test results have come in and we need to talk in person. Can you come to my office today?" The doctor's tone sent a chill down William's spine. In 40 years of friendship, he had rarely seen him so serious. "I'll be there in an hour," he replied, hanging up the phone. As his private driver navigated the armored Mercedes through the congested streets of New York, William pondered how he would break the news to Elizabeth. His wife had always been his safe harbor, but in recent months, something had changed. She seemed distant, preoccupied, as if carrying a secret too heavy to share. At the office, Dr. Johnson greeted him with a solemn expression. "William, we found something concerning in your blood. A rare toxin, extremely specific. I've never seen anything like it in my entire career." "A toxin? What do you mean?" William asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. "It's a synthetic substance, William. That means—" The doctor paused, carefully choosing his words. "This means someone deliberately introduced it into your system." The silence that followed was deafening. William felt the world spinning around him, but it wasn't the dizziness from the past few days. It was the realization that someone close, someone he trusted, was trying to poison him. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Without treatment, 6 months at most, but William, we need to act fast. This toxin is too complex to be the work of an amateur. There must be a specialized lab involved." When he returned home that night, the Thompson mansion in Greenwich Village seemed different. Every shadow hid a potential threat. Every familiar face now wore a mask of doubt. Elizabeth was waiting for him in the library, his favorite place in the house. There at 62, she maintained the elegance that had won him over decades ago. "William, you look pale. What happened?" He contemplated his wife for a moment before answering. How could he tell the person who had shared his life for so long that he was being poisoned? How could he admit that one of the suspects might be someone so close? "Elizabeth, we need to talk about your brother, Richard," he said, surprising even himself with the direction of the conversation. Elizabeth's face visibly paled. Richard, her brother presumed dead 15 years ago, was a forbidden subject in the family. "Why are you bringing him up now?" "Because I need to know the truth. You never told me exactly what happened to him after that fight for control of the company." Elizabeth stood up abruptly, her hands trembling slightly. "I can't talk about that, William. Some things should remain buried." At that moment, Michael burst into the library, his usual carefree expression replaced by an unusual urgency. "Dad, we need to talk about the investments in Europe. There's something you need to know." William observed his middle son, noticing, for the first time, small details that had previously gone unnoticed. The poorly disguised nervousness, the sweat stains on his designer dress shirt, the gaze that avoided meeting his. "Michael, have you been moving money without my authorization?" he asked directly. The son paled. "Dad, it's not what you're thinking. I can explain." "Can you?" interrupted William. "Because right now, son, I don't know what to think about. Anything or anyone," Elizabeth intervened, stepping between father and son. "William, you're not well. We need to call a doctor." "No," he replied more forcefully than he intended. "I've seen enough doctors for today. What I need now are answers." William's phone vibrated in his pocket. It was a message from Sophia, his youngest. "Dad, we need to meet. Alone. It's about Uncle Richard." William felt his blood run cold. How could his youngest daughter know something about Richard? What else was his family hiding from him? Looking at Elizabeth and Michael, he realized that every answer he got would likely lead to more questions. But he had no choice. If he wanted to survive, he needed to find out who, among the people he loved most, wanted his end. Sophia chose a discreet cafe in Greenwich Village for the meeting. William observed his youngest daughter through the window before entering. Dark hair tied up in a casual bun, simple clothes that contradicted her family's wealth. She had always been the least ostentatious of the 3 children, preferring to work behind the scenes on the Thompson Group's social projects rather than appearing at corporate events. "Dad?" She stood up to hug him, her face showing a mix of concern and determination. "Thank you for coming alone." William sat down, studying his daughter's features intently. "Sophia, how do you know about Richard?" She took a deep breath before answering. 3 months ago, he came to me. At first, I thought it was some kind of scam, but he knew details about our family that no one else could know. The waiter approached to take their orders, but William dismissed him with a gesture. His attention was entirely focused on his daughter. "All these years, Mom made us believe that he had died in an accident abroad," continued Sophia, her voice low and controlled. "But the truth is very different, Dad. Uncle Richard is alive and never left the United States." William felt the weight of that revelation. "Richard, your former partner and brother-in-law, had been crucial in the early years of the Thompson Group. His alleged death coincided with a turbulent time in the company when difficult decisions had to be made. "Why did he seek you out?" "Specifically?" asked William, trying to keep his voice steady despite the dizziness that was beginning to creep in again. Sophia hesitated. "He said I'm the only one who inherited the true spirit of the family. That Emily is too ambitious and Michael too irresponsible. Dad, he told me about the deal you made 15 years ago." William paled. That deal had been his best-kept secret, something not even Elizabeth knew fully. "Sophia, you don't understand. At the time, the company was on the brink of collapse. Richard wanted to sell everything to a foreign group. I did what needed to be done to preserve the family legacy." "Preserve the legacy?" Sophia laughed humorlessly. "Is that what you told yourself when you forged his signature on the stock transfer documents?" The shock made William knock over the coffee cup the waiter had just brought. "How did you—" "Uncle Richard kept the evidence, Dad. All these years, he meticulously planned his return. And now—" Sophia paused, her eyes welling up. "Now he wants me to help him reclaim what's rightfully his." William felt the world spin. It wasn't just the toxin in his blood. It was the weight of past lies and decisions coming back to haunt him. "Daughter, you don't know your uncle like I do. He has always been manipulative, capable of anything to get what he wants. Why do you think your mother agreed to keep the secret about him being alive?" Sophia stood up abruptly. "Maybe because she has secrets of her own to hide, Dad. Have you ever wondered why Mom travels so much to the countryside of New York? Why she always comes back nervous from those trips?" The revelation hit William like a punch. Elizabeth's frequent travels, her mood swings, the whispered phone calls late at night. It all began to make terrible sense. "Where is he, Sophia?" he asked, his voice almost pleading. "I can't tell you," she replied, grabbing her bag, "but you'll find out soon. He asked me to give you this." Sophia slid an envelope across the table. "It's lab results, Dad, about the substance that's poisoning you." Before William could react, Sophia was already at the cafe door. She paused for a moment, looked back with tear-filled eyes and said, "I'm sorry, Dad, but some truths need to come out no matter the cost." William opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside, along with the technical reports on the toxin, was an old photo. Him and Richard, young and smiling, on the day of the inauguration of the group's first company. On the back, a handwritten message: "You chose the empire. I chose the truth. Now it's time to settle our accounts, brother." The day after the meeting with Sophia, William arrived early at the office. The building was still practically empty when he began sifting through the group's financial records. As the chairman of the board, he had unrestricted access to all transactions, but he hadn't conducted a detailed review in months, relying on Emily's management and periodic reports. "Mr. Thompson," Margaret, his secretary, appeared at the door, surprised to find him there so early. "Your son Michael is here. I know he doesn't have an appointment, but he insists it's urgent." William glanced at the computer screen, where he had just uncovered a series of suspicious transfers to offshore companies. "Send him in, Margaret, and please, don't interrupt us." Michael entered the office with his usual carefree demeanor, but William noticed the nervousness in his gestures. His son kept adjusting his expensive tie and running his hand through his impeccably styled hair. "Dad, about last night, I need to explain some things." "Sit down, Michael," William gestured to the chair in front of him. "Start by explaining these transfers to companies in the Cayman Islands. $15 million in the last 3 months. Michael's face turned pale. "How did you—" "I'm still the chairman of the board, son. The question is, why are you diverting money from the company? And more importantly, to whom?" Michael stood up, beginning to pace back and forth across the office. "Dad, it's not what it looks like. I was trying to protect the company. There are people, dangerous people involved." "What people, Michael?" "It started 6 months ago." He ran his hands over his face, visibly upset. "A man approached me at one of the parties I go to. He said he had information about a scheme to take control of the group. At first, I thought he was just another opportunist, but he knew details. Dad, details about Uncle Richard. William felt his stomach churn. Go on. He showed me documents, old contracts, proof of things that happened in the past. He said if I didn't cooperate, he would make it all public. The group's reputation would be destroyed. So you started paying, William concluded, his voice heavy with disappointment. I had no choice. They threatened to expose everything, the forged documents, the secret agreement, even... Michael hesitated. Even what? The real reason Uncle Richard disappeared. Dad, I know about the lab in Austin. I know what happened there. William felt his blood run cold. The laboratory in Austin was another secret buried 15 years ago, something that should have remained in the past. How did you find out about the laboratory? Emily, replied Michael, surprising his father. She's been secretly investigating for years. She was the one who warned me about the threats, but we never imagined they would go this far. William stood up with difficulty, another bout of dizziness hitting him. Your sister knew everything and didn't tell me. She was trying to protect you, Dad. We all were. But now... Michael grabbed his phone, showing a series of messages. Now they want more, much more. And if they don't get it, they threaten to use the same substance they're using on you, on other family members. The revelation struck William like a bolt of lightning. Michael knew about the poisoning. Son, are you involved in this? No, Michael exclaimed, tears in his eyes. Dad, I may be many things, but I would never do something like this to you. The money I transferred, it was to buy time to figure out who's behind all this. Emily and I have been working together trying to trace the connections. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Because we knew you'd try to handle it all on your own, like you always do. But this time it's different, Dad. Uncle Richard isn't alone in this revenge. He has powerful allies, people who also hold grudges against our family. William sat down again, the weight of the revelations adding to the effects of the toxin in his system. I need to speak with your sister, now. She's on her way to Austin, Michael replied. She said she found a lead about the lab, something, about a former employee who still works there. At that moment, William's phone vibrated. It was a message from Elizabeth. We need to talk. I found something about Richard. It's all connected to the lab in Austin. Please come home now. William looked at his son, then at the message on his phone. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was more disturbing than he could have imagined. William found Elizabeth in the winter garden of the mansion, her favorite spot for important conversations. The orchids she cultivated with such care framed the space, creating an atmosphere that contrasted with the tension of the moment. His wife was seated in her favorite armchair, holding an old wooden box he had never seen before. I took your time, she said without looking up from the box. I was with Michael. Elizabeth, he told me about the money, the threats. William stopped when he saw his wife raise her hand, cutting him off. This all started long before, William, long before you can imagine. She opened the box, revealing dozens of old letters and yellowed photographs. Richard never accepted losing control of the Austin laboratory. That place wasn't just another asset of the group to him. William sat in the armchair beside her, feeling the familiar weight of dizziness that now constantly accompanied him. What are you talking about? The lab was his dream, William. It wasn't just a pharmaceutical research company. Richard was developing something revolutionary there, something that could change everything. Elizabeth picked up one of the letters, her hands trembling slightly. He sent me these letters over the years. At first I ignored them, but then... You kept in touch with him all this time? William's voice wavered between disbelief and hurt. Not by choice, Elizabeth sighed deeply. He made me promise to keep his secrets, threatening to expose something that would destroy not only you but our entire family. William picked up one of the photographs. It showed Richard in a laboratory, surrounded by sophisticated equipment and a team of researchers. The date on the back indicated it had been taken just 3 months ago. What was he developing in Austin, Elizabeth? A new class of biochemical compounds. Something he called Project Prometheus. The idea was to create substances that could selectively alter certain functions of the human body. Elizabeth paused, her hands clutching a handkerchief. The toxin in your system, it's one of the results of that research. The revelation hit William like a physical blow. "Are you saying that my own brother-in-law developed the substance that's poisoning me?" "It's not that simple." Elizabeth stood up, walking to the window. "Richard didn't want to use the research that way. He was developing revolutionary treatments for serious illnesses. But when you took control of the group and shut down the lab, I closed that place because the research was becoming too dangerous," William exclaimed, standing up as well. "The reports I received indicated unethical experiments, Elizabeth. I couldn't allow it to continue." "The reports were false, William." Elizabeth turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Emily discovered this a few months ago. Someone forged those documents to convince you to shut down the lab, and it wasn't Richard." William felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "Who?" "The same man who is now helping Richard in his revenge. Dr. Silverstein, the former head of research at the lab. He wanted to sell the discoveries to an international pharmaceutical company. When Richard refused, he orchestrated the entire plan to destroy him." Elizabeth approached her husband, taking his hands in hers. "William, in the past few weeks, I've been secretly visiting Richard. He's sick, very sick. The development of these toxins has affected him over the years. He doesn't have much time left and wants to settle his affairs before he goes." "Why are you telling me all this now?" "Because I discovered something terrible." Elizabeth let go of her husband's hands and picked up another envelope from the box. "Sophia isn't just helping Richard. She discovered the formula for the antidote to the toxin and is using it as leverage. Our daughter believes she can take control of everything. The group, the lab, the research." William staggered, leaning on an armchair. "Our own daughter. She's not alone," Elizabeth continued, her voice trembling. "Emily found documents linking Sophia to Dr. Silverstein. They planned everything together, the poisoning, the threats to Michael, even Richard's return." At that moment, William's phone vibrated. It was a message from Emily. "Dad, I'm at the lab in Austin. You need to come immediately. I found Dr. Silverstein, and Sophia is here." The old lab in Austin stood like an abandoned fortress on the outskirts of the city. William, accompanied by Michael, observed the imposing structure as their driver parked the car. The place seemed deserted, but a few lights on the third floor betrayed human presence. "Dad, are you sure you want to go in?" asked Michael, his usual relaxed demeanor replaced by rare seriousness. "You're not in any condition." "My two daughters are in there," William interrupted, his voice steady despite his constant discomfort. "And finally, I will uncover the whole truth." As they entered the building, the smell of chemicals and abandonment mingled in the air. Their footsteps echoed through the empty hallways as they climbed the stairs, avoiding the elevator as a precaution. On the third floor, raised voices came from one of the main rooms. "You don't understand, Emily." It was Sophia's voice, filled with an emotion William had never heard before. "Father destroyed Uncle Richard's legacy. He destroyed research that could have saved thousands of lives. And your solution was to poison him?" Emily replied, her usually controlled voice now trembling with anger. "Our own family, Sophia." William and Michael approached the slightly open door quietly. Inside the room, Emily stood near the window, while Sophia was positioned next to a laboratory bench. Between them was a grey-haired man William recognized immediately, Dr. Silverstein. "What a touching family reunion," the scientist said with a cold smile. "We were only missing you, William, and you brought the Playboy along. What a pleasant surprise." "Father!" Sophia turned, startled. In her hands, a vial containing a bluish liquid glowed under the fluorescent light. "You shouldn't be here." "The antidote," William murmured, recognizing the vial. "So it's true, you really are behind all of this." "Don't be unfair." Sophia took a step forward. "All I did was try to correct a historical mistake. The Prometheus Project could revolutionize medicine. But you chose to believe lies, to destroy Uncle Richard's dream." "Lies that I helped create," Dr. Silverstein interjected, his smile widening. "You know, William, it was relatively easy to convince you to shut down the lab. All it took were a few forged reports about unethical experiments, some insinuations about risks. You were always so concerned about your precious reputation." "Why?" William asked, feeling the strength leave his legs. "Money, obviously," the scientist replied. Richard's research was worth billions. When he refused to sell, I had to be more creative, and your lovely youngest daughter turned out to be a surprisingly useful ally. Sophia, Emily stepped toward her sister. Don't you see you're being manipulated? Dr. Silverstein doesn't care about Uncle Richard's legacy. He just wants to sell the research. No, Sophia clutched the vial to her chest. You don't understand. I continued the research. I perfected the formulas. The antidote I created isn't just to save my father. It's proof that the Prometheus project can do good. Do good? Michael laughed humorlessly. And that's why you poisoned our father to prove a point. A noise at the door made everyone turn. Elizabeth entered the room, followed by a figure that made William freeze, Richard. His brother-in-law was unrecognizable. Thin, pale, leaning on a cane, but his eyes still burned with the same intensity as 15 years ago. Enough. Richard's voice, though weak, carried authority. Sophia, my niece, and I never wanted this. My research was meant to heal, not to harm. Uncle? Sophia let the vial slip through her fingers. Emily, in a quick motion, managed to catch it before it hit the ground. Dr. Silverstein, Richard turned to his former collaborator. You poisoned not only my brother, but also my soul. You turned my discoveries into weapons. You corrupted my niece. You're delusional, old man, Silverstein cut in, pulling a small vial from his pocket. And now that we're all gathered, how about one last experiment? This concentrated toxin is enough to contaminate the air in this room in seconds. 6 pairs of eyes fixed on the vial in the scientist's hands. The familiar confrontation had turned into something far more dangerous, and time was running out, for everyone. The silence in the laboratory was cutting. Dr. Silverstein held the vial aloft like a silent threat, while all the members of the Thompson family remained motionless, calculating their next moves. Emily still held the antidote she had taken from Sophia's hands, her eyes darting between the vial and her younger sister. You won't do this, said Richard, his voice weak but determined. You'd be affected by the toxin, too. The scientist smiled. Do you really think I didn't prepare for this? He pulled a mask from inside his lab coat. Years of developing toxins have taught me to always have an escape plan. What's the point of this madness? Asked Elizabeth, stepping forward. You've already gotten what you wanted. The research, the documents. No, my dear Mrs. Thompson, interrupted Silverstein. What I want is much more. I want all of you to feel what it's like to have your dreams destroyed. Like I felt when Richard refused to sell the research. Like I felt when William shut down the lab. Sophia, who had been paralyzed since her uncle's arrival, finally found her voice. You used me. All those stories about continuing Uncle Richard's legacy. Oh, don't be naive, dear, Silverstein sneered. You were useful, very useful. Your dedication to developing the antidote allowed us to perfect the toxin, and your guilt over your family's past made everything easier. William, struggling against a new wave of dizziness, leaned on Michael. What do you really want, Silverstein? Money? The patents for the research? I want you to admit it. Admit that you destroyed years of research out of greed, that you shut down this lab not out of ethics, but out of fear of losing control. No, Emily's voice was firm. You're wrong, and I'll prove it. In a swift motion, she uncapped the vial of the antidote. Emily, no, shouted Sophia, understanding her sister's intention. But it was too late. Emily poured the contents of the vial into her own mouth, shocking everyone. What have you done? Asked Silverstein, his mask of control faltering for the first time. I proved that I trust my sister's work, replied Emily, wiping a blue drop from the corner of her mouth. Sophia may have made mistakes, but she would never create something to truly harm. Isn't that right, sis? Sophia covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. The antidote, it's not ready. It still needed more testing. So you've just condemned your own sister, laughed Silverstein, raising his vial again. How touching. No, interrupted Richard, struggling to walk over to Sophia. The antidote is perfect. I supervised every step of her research through the reports she sent me. Sophia has a natural gift for biochemistry, something even you, Silverstein, never had. The scientist hesitated, watching Emily. The relentless lawyer remained standing, showing no signs of discomfort. Impossible, he murmured. The simulations indicated the antidote was unstable. Your simulations, corrected Richard. Sophia developed a completely new approach, something even I hadn't thought of. And now, he paused, smiling for the first time, now, Emily has proven it works. Michael, who had quietly approached Silverstein during the argument, took advantage of the scientist's moment of distraction. With a quick movement, he snatched the vial from his hands. "No!" shouted Silverstein, trying to reclaim the vial, but his reflexes were no match for the middle son of the Thompsons. "Enough with the poisons for today," said Michael, handing the vial to Emily, who carefully stored it in a protective case. "You don't understand." Silverstein backed up against the wall, his face twisted in anger. "This research is my life. I spent years planning revenge," interrupted Elizabeth. "Years manipulating my daughter, years poisoning my husband." "How you will answer for all of this," added Emily, her professional lawyer's voice returning. "We have all the evidence, the forged documents, the records of illegal research, the bank transfers. And I," added Sophia, straightening her shoulders, "will testify about everything." William, who was watching the scene with a mix of pride and sadness, felt his legs weaken. Richard hurried to support his brother. "We need to get you to the hospital," he said. "Sophia, get more of the antidote. Emily is fine, but we need to start your father's treatment immediately." As Sophia ran to the adjacent lab, William looked at his gathered family. Dr. Silverstein was defeated, leaning against the wall, his ambitions destroyed by the unity he had tried so hard to break. Elizabeth held his hand, years of secrets, finally giving way to the truth. His children, each in their own way, had proven their worth and love for the family. "Richard," William called, his voice weak, "forgive me for everything." His brother smiled sadly. "There is much to forgive on both sides, brother. But now we have time for that. Thanks to your daughter, we have the antidote not just for the toxin, but also for the mistakes of the past." 3 weeks after the events at the Austin laboratory, the hospital room where William was recovering had become an unlikely center for family reconciliation. The white, sterile walls bore witness daily to small moments of reconnection among the members of the Thompson family. That particular morning, William gazed out the window at the city's bustle while awaiting the results of his latest tests. The treatment with the antidote developed by Sophia was showing promising results, but the true healing process went far beyond the physical. "Excuse me," Sophia's gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. She entered the room carrying a folder and a laptop. "I brought the lab reports for us to review together." Since the confrontation, Sophia had taken on the responsibility of personally overseeing her father's treatment, transforming her guilt into dedication to his recovery. With each visit, in addition to monitoring his progress, she shared details of the research she was now conducting ethically and transparently. "How is the Prometheus project coming along?" William asked, adjusting himself in the hospital bed. "We're reorienting the entire research," she replied, opening the laptop. "Uncle Richard has been an incredible mentor, even with his own health limitations. We're focusing on developing treatments for autoimmune diseases." William smiled, noticing how his youngest daughter had matured over the past few weeks. "And Emily, how is she handling all of this legally?" "She's amazing, Dad," Sophia smiled, for the first time without a trace of bitterness in her voice. "She secured an agreement with the district attorney's office that allows us to continue the research under strict supervision. In exchange, all the knowledge developed will be shared with public research institutions." The door to the room opened again, this time revealing Emily and Michael. The lawyer carried her traditional document folder, while her brother brought coffee for everyone. "Family meeting this early?" Michael joked, handing out the cups. "Or should I say, board meeting?" "Both," replied Emily, her professional demeanor softened by an affectionate smile. "We have some important decisions to make about the future of the group." William observed his 3 children, marveling at the transformation he saw in each of them. Emily had let go of her obsession with control, learning to trust and delegate. Michael, surprisingly, had proven to be a skilled negotiator, crucial in talks with investors and partners during the crisis. And Sophia, his youngest, had finally found her true purpose. Before business, interrupted Elizabeth, entering the room with Richard. The doctors want to speak with us. The latest test results have come in. Dr. Johnson, who had been following the case from the beginning, entered shortly after. His face carried a smile that already hinted at good news. Mr. Thompson, the results are extraordinary, he announced, showing the test images on the iPad. The toxin is being completely eliminated from your system. The antidote developed by your daughter not only neutralized the harmful effects, but is also regenerating the affected tissues. Richard, leaning on his cane, stepped closer to examine the results. Impressive, Sophia. You've achieved something I never even imagined possible. I had good teachers, she replied, glancing meaningfully at her uncle and father. And what about Dr. Silverstein? Asked William, the only shadow still lingering over the family. He accepted the plea deal, replied Emily, in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's cooperating with the authorities, revealing the entire network of illegal research he built over the years. The most important thing, added Elizabeth, sitting beside her husband, is that we can finally move forward. No more secrets, no more distrust. Actually, Michael cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. There's something I need to confess. Those suspicious transfers, not all of them were blackmail. Some of the money went to fund a rehabilitation clinic in Rio de Janeiro. Emily finished, surprising her brother. I know, Michael, and I also know you've been clean for 2 months. The middle child of the Thompsons lowered his eyes, moved. How did you... I'm your older sister, Emily smiled. It's my job to know these things. William felt his eyes well up as he watched the scene. His family, which weeks ago had been on the brink of collapse, was now coming together with a new understanding and mutual acceptance. The mistakes of the past had not been forgotten, but they were being turned into lessons for the future. I have a proposal, he said, drawing everyone's attention. When I leave here, I'd like to completely restructure the Thompson Group. Not just the company, but the way we work together as a family. The main auditorium of the Thompson Group was packed for the official announcement of the company's changes. 2 months after his recovery, William Thompson took the stage accompanied by his entire family. The murmurs of the audience, composed of employees, shareholders, and journalists, ceased as he approached the microphone. 40 years ago, when I founded this company with my brother Richard, we had a dream, he began, his voice strong once again. A dream that at some point along the way was overshadowed by ambition and fear. Today, we are here to reclaim the essence of that original dream and turn it into something even greater. Elizabeth, seated in the front row next to Richard, smiled encouragingly at her husband. Their intertwined hands symbolized not just the reconciliation of the couple, but of the entire family. The Thompson Group is transforming, continued William. Starting today, our structure will be completely overhauled. We will no longer be just a business conglomerate, but an organization dedicated to making a difference in people's lives. Emily stood up, joining her father on stage with a prepared presentation. The auditorium screens lit up, displaying the company's new organizational chart. As the Legal and Compliance Director, she announced, I am pleased to present our new corporate structure. The Thompson Group will be divided into 3 major divisions, each led by a family member, but with a common purpose, to unite profit and social impact. The slides changed, revealing the first project. The Research and Development Division, led by Sophia Thompson in partnership with our scientific director, Richard Thompson, is already revolutionizing our approach to pharmaceutical research. Sophia, dressed in a blazer over her traditional lab coat, stood up to explain, the Prometheus project is being completely reimagined. Our first major initiative is the development of affordable treatments for rare diseases. We have already established partnerships with 5 public universities and 3 international research centers. The audience applauded enthusiastically. As the screens changed again, now showing sustainability and social responsibility projects, the Social Investment Division, Emily continued, will be led by Michael Thompson, who has surprised everyone with his innovative vision for impact-driven projects. Michael, wearing a well-tailored suit that contrasted with his former Playboy image, stood up. Our focus will be on investing in startups and projects that combine financial returns with measurable social impact. We have already identified 20 promising initiatives in areas such as education, preventive healthcare, and clean technologies. William watched his children with evident pride. Each had found their true calling, turning their former weaknesses into unique strengths. Finally, Emily resumed, the corporate division, which will remain under my management, will be responsible for ensuring that all our operations adhere to the highest ethical and governance standards. We have implemented an independent advisory board and created an ethics committee with external expert participation. Elizabeth stood up to present the final part of the project. As president of the Thompson Institute, I am announcing that we will allocate 30% of our annual profits to social projects managed by the Foundation. Our first initiative will be the construction of research and treatment centers in underserved regions of the country. Richard, despite his failing health, made sure to share a few words. When I created the Prometheus project, I dreamed of using science to benefit humanity. Today, I see that dream being reborn in an even more powerful way through the next generation. William took the microphone back for his closing remarks. I learned the hard way that a true legacy isn't measured by numbers on financial statements, but by the positive impact we make on people's lives. Every member of this family has found their own way to contribute to that purpose. The audience rose in a warm ovation. Journalists snapped photos of the historic moment. The Thompson family, once on the brink of collapse, now united in a transformative project that went far beyond business. Backstage after the presentation, the family gathered in a collective embrace. The tears in Sophia's eyes were no longer of guilt or resentment, but of hope. Michael's smile no longer hid insecurities, but reflected purpose. And Emily, always so composed, allowed herself to show the emotion she felt. "Dad," Sophia called out, "we found something in the old lab archives, an early research project by Uncle Richard that could revolutionize the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases. And I identified a startup that developed an innovative method for distributing medicine to remote areas," added Michael. "I've already arranged all the documentation for the new partnerships," Emily concluded. William smiled, looking at his family. The crisis that had nearly destroyed them had become the catalyst for a renewal far deeper than anyone could have imagined. A year after the restructuring of the Thompson Group, the family gathered for a dinner at William and Elizabeth's home. The Winter Garden, once the setting for painful revelations, now hosted an intimate celebration of the new era. Elizabeth's orchids, more vibrant than ever, silently bore witness to the transformation they had all undergone. "Who would have thought," Richard commented, now in a wheelchair but with eyes shining with satisfaction, "that we would need to come so close to the edge to find our true path?" William, seated beside his brother, nodded. His face, once marked by distrust and worry, now showed a serenity that surprised everyone who knew him. "The first treatment developed by Sophia is already in its final testing phase," he said proudly. "And to think we almost lost all that potential because of old grudges." Sophia, who was serving tea to everyone, blushed slightly. "Actually, Dad, we have more news. The research we found in Uncle Richard's archives, combined with our new discoveries, has opened up possibilities we never imagined. And it's not just in the lab that things are progressing," Michael chimed in, raising his cup in an impromptu toast. "The social investment program has already supported 50 startups. 3 of them have developed solutions that are revolutionizing access to healthcare in underserved communities." Emily, who had just arrived from a board meeting, joined the group. "And the numbers prove we were right. The new structure not only maintained the group's profitability, but also increased our market relevance. Companies from all over the world are reaching out to understand our management model." Elizabeth watched the scene with teary eyes. Her family, once torn apart by secrets and mistrust, was now openly conversing, sharing achievements and future plans. The weight of years of silence had given way to a lightness she barely remembered was possible. "I received a letter from Dr. Silverstein," she commented, drawing everyone's attention. "He's collaborating on a rehabilitation program for scientists who were involved in unethical research. It seems our story has served as a lesson for many people." It's curious, Sophia reflected, how sometimes we need to get completely lost to truly find ourselves. William stood up, walking over to the window overlooking the city. The sun was setting over New York, painting the sky with shades of orange that reminded him of the days when he and Richard dreamed of building something meaningful. "You know what makes me happiest," he said, turning to the family. "It's not the success of the business, nor even the lives we're helping to transform. It's seeing that each of you has found your own path, your own purpose. And to think I almost threw it all away," Sophia murmured, but her voice no longer carried the weight of guilt. "Sometimes I wonder how I could have been so blind." We're all blind in some way," replied Emily, embracing her sister. "Me with my excessive control, Michael with his escape from responsibility, you with your resentment. But look at us now." "The true legacy of the Thompsons," interjected Richard, his voice weak but emotional, "isn't in the labs, the investments, or the contracts. It's here, in this room, in how we've transformed our wounds into wisdom." Elizabeth stood up, picking up an old photo album. "I found this morning," she said, opening it to a yellowed photograph. In it, William and Richard, young and smiling, posed in front of the group's first office. "We were so idealistic," commented Richard, touching the photograph with trembling fingers. "And we still are," replied William, "only now with the wisdom that only scars can bring." Michael, looking at the photo, smiled. "You know what's most amazing? That initial dream of yours to make a difference in people's lives. It never really died. It just needed to go through a few generations to be reborn even stronger." One by one, the family members shared their plans for the future. Emily spoke about new compliance programs that were revolutionizing the market. Sophia described promising research that could save thousands of lives. Michael presented social impact projects that combine technology and humanity. As night fell over New York, the Thompson family remained together, no longer prisoners of the past but architects of a future none of them could have imagined a year before. The empire William had built hadn't crumbled. It had transformed into something much greater, a legacy of redemption, purpose, and love. "To family," toasted William, raising his cup. "To truth," added Elizabeth. "To the future," concluded Richard. And in the unspoken words, in the glimmer of the gazes that met, there was the certainty that sometimes you have to lose everything you have to find everything you can be.